I'm Maya Bennett, a single mother, working as a janitor on the 23rd floor of Atlantic Plaza. I'm nothing special, just one of the invisible people in the shadow of the powerful. This morning, like every other morning, I pushed my cleaning cart through the silent hallways. The cold air made my fingers tighten around the master key. But it wasn't the chill that made me tremble, it was the weight of living paycheck to paycheck, knowing I barely had enough to get by. Let alone throw my daughter, Ella, the birthday party she deserved. As I entered Richard Vaughn's office, the CEO of Vaughn Development Group, everything seemed the same: polished furniture, the scent of expensive cologne in the air. But something was different today. On his desk, I noticed a thick folder carelessly left open, papers scattered across it like leaves in the wind. It wasn't my business to look, but my eyes couldn't help but follow the trail of documents. The first thing I saw made my stomach drop. Declaration of bankruptcy. I glanced at the clock. It was 6:55 a.m. No one would be in until 8. I shouldn't have been reading the papers, but I couldn't stop. As I scanned the pages, the numbers jumped out at me. The total debt listed was $64 million, but after running the numbers in my head, I saw it didn't add up. It was a simple mistake, but a huge one. The real total was $47 million. Someone had inflated the debt by $17 million. My heart raced. This wasn't just a typo, it was a setup. Someone was trying to force Richard Vaughn into signing away his company under false pretenses. I froze. My father had lost everything to accounting fraud years ago, and I couldn't let that happen again. I quickly snapped photos of the pages with my cracked phone and wrote a note: Mr. Vaughn, please check the numbers on page 7 before signing. The total debt adds up to $47 million, not 64. Someone inflated the figures. I stuck the note on top of the documents, straightened everything just as I found it, and rushed out, my heart pounding in my chest. As I left the building that morning, my mind raced. I knew I couldn't just forget what I had seen, but the consequences of getting involved were too high. My hands shook as I clutched my phone, the images I'd taken of the fraudulent documents still fresh in my mind. What if I was wrong? What if this was all just a misunderstanding? I had nothing to lose. But I could lose everything by being wrong: my job, my future, maybe even my daughter's stability. I tried to tell myself it wasn't my business. I wasn't part of the corporate world. I was just the janitor, cleaning the floors and emptying the trash. No one cared what I thought. Or so I believed. The people who worked in those offices, the ones who wore expensive suits and carried briefcases, they lived in a different world. A world I would never belong to. But then, I thought about Ella, her upcoming birthday, the reality that we barely scraped by each month. I couldn't let something happen to Richard Vaughn's company the way it happened to my father. I couldn't let another person be destroyed by numbers that didn't add up. I went home, my mind a whirlwind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to do something. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the note I had written to Richard Vaughn. The words felt heavy in my hands. Please check the numbers on page 7 before signing. Was that enough? Would he believe me? I didn't ask for anything in return. No money. No favor, just the truth to be known. But if I didn't act, nothing would change. And the same thing that happened to my father might happen again. Only this time, it would be someone else's family losing everything. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, thinking about what could go wrong. I knew the risks. What if Richard thought I was just another troublemaker trying to get attention? What if the whole thing was a trap? I didn't trust anyone in that building. And I had no reason to believe that Richard Vaughn was any different. But I had to try. I had to act. The next morning, I arrived at work early, my heart beating in my throat. I wasn't sure what I expected to happen. But I knew I couldn't walk away. The papers were still in the same place when I slipped into the office. Just like I had left them. The note was still on top of the stack. Untouched. My fingers trembled as I carefully adjusted the documents, making sure everything was exactly as it had been. The thought of Richard seeing it of him maybe taking action kept me on edge. But I couldn't stay and wait. I had done all I could. The rest was out of my hands. As I locked the door and stepped back into the hallway, I glanced at the clock. It was still early. I should have gone home. I should have gone back to my daughter. But instead, I couldn't move. My feet felt heavy, like they were rooted to the floor. A part of me was afraid of what might happen next. But the bigger part, the part that remembered what my father went through, knew I had made the right decision. The next morning, as I was about to clock out, I felt a presence behind me. I turned, and there he was, Richard Vaughn. His suit was wrinkled, his face pale, eyes red-rimmed. He didn't look like the powerful CEO I'd seen in the building before. He looked like a man who had already lost everything. His briefcase was clutched tightly against his chest, like it was his last lifeline. "Maya," he said, his voice low and strained. I barely had time to register his words before he continued. "I need to speak with you. It's urgent." My heart skipped a beat. I stood frozen, trying to decide if this was some kind of mistake. Why would the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company want to talk to me? A janitor, and yet, I followed him, my feet moving against my will. He led me to a quiet corner of the garage, away from prying eyes. There was no anger in his eyes, no suspicion, just raw desperation. "Was it you?" he asked, holding up the post-it note I'd left in his office. I nodded, my throat tightening. He took a shaky breath and sank to his knees, his briefcase falling to the floor. I wasn't prepared for the sight of the billionaire on the ground, tears streaming down his face. "You just saved my life," he whispered. My mind raced. What was going on? This man, who had everything, was breaking down in front of me. I didn't know what to say, but he didn't give me a chance. "Austin Monroe," he said, choking on the name. "My partner. He forged the debt figures. He was going to force me into bankruptcy. And then he'd buy my company for nothing." I didn't fully understand what he was saying, but I could see the desperation in his eyes. His voice cracked as he continued. "I was about to sign the papers this morning. Austin has been manipulating the figures for months." I felt a sickening knot form in my stomach. This wasn't just corporate scheming, it was betrayal on a level I hadn't imagined. Richard wiped his eyes and took a deep breath, his composure returning. "I checked the security logs," he said, his voice keener now. "Only one person accessed my floor before 8:00 a.m. You, a single mother, had no reason to help me." He stared at me, as if waiting for an answer. I didn't have one. Why had I done it? Was it because of the note I'd written? Because I'd seen something that others had ignored? He stood, his eyes locking with mine. "I don't know why you did it, but you just saved everything." There was a shift in the air, a change I couldn't quite place. It wasn't just gratitude. There was something deeper, something I hadn't expected from a man like him. He reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. A silent thanks. "I need you to come with me," he said, suddenly firm. "Austin will be here soon. I'm going to confront him, and I want you there as a witness." He hesitated. Every instinct in me screamed to walk away, to stay out of it. But something inside me, something stronger than fear, urged me to go. For Elia, for the chance to do something that mattered. I nodded, though my mind was still spinning. I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but it didn't matter. I was already too deep to turn back. The elevator doors slid open, and we stepped out onto the 23rd floor. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. Richard's usual confidence was gone, replaced by something darker, resolve mixed with a quiet fear. He walked with purpose toward his office, and I followed, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew what was coming, but nothing could prepare me for the confrontation that was about to unfold. The door opened, and we were greeted by the soft hum of the office. The city skyline just visible through the tall windows. The air felt charged, the silence deafening. I took my place in the corner, trying to keep my presence unnoticed. Then, I saw him, Austin Monroe. His silver hair perfectly combed, his smile just a little too smooth. He didn't seem to notice Richard's state or the gravity of the moment. He looked at me briefly, then back to Richard. As if everything was normal, Richard's voice broke the silence. Sharp and steady. Sight down, he ordered. Austin hesitated, but the challenge in Richard's voice left no room for argument. He took his seat across from Richard, leaning back with a smirk, clearly unaware of what was coming. I stood silently, my hands clutching the edge of the desk, my pulse racing. You look terrible, my friend, Austin said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. He glanced at Richard's disheveled appearance, his words tinged with mockery. Long night. I see. Don't worry. Once you sign the papers, it'll all be over. You'll finally be free. Richard's eyes narrowed, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it before. Free or stripped of everything I've built, he asked, lifting the folder between them. Austin's face faltered, the smirk slipping for the first time. What's this about? Richard, he asked, his tone turning defensive. Richard didn't respond immediately. Instead, he slid the post-it note toward Austin, the one I had left behind. Austin's gaze flickered over the small yellow square, and for the briefest moment, the confidence he wore so well cracked, he didn't know what to say. And in that silence, the truth hung between them. Richard leaned forward, his voice steady but filled with accusation. You've been forging debt figures for months. Austin, you were going to bankrupt this company and buy it for pennies on the dollar. Austin shifted in his seat, his fingers tightening around the armrests. For the first time, he looked vulnerable, but he quickly masked it with a sneer. Someone's playing games, he muttered. But the words had no power anymore. I watched as Richard stood and reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a thick envelope, and my heart sank as he laid it on the table in front of Austin. Julie Baxter kept your emails, Richard said, his voice unwavering. She kept the backups you thought you deleted. I know about the fake creditors, the inflated invoices, and the kickbacks you were waiting for once I was forced into bankruptcy. Austin's eyes darted between us, his mouth opening but failing to find words. The silence that followed was suffocating. Austin finally broke it, his voice trembling with panic. You went through my private files, he hissed. You can't prove anything. Richard didn't flinch. Oh, I can, he said, his tone cutting through the tension. Julie did. She came to me last night. The words hung in the air like a final judgment. Austin's face turned pale as he realized his betrayal had been exposed. You've been caught, Richard continued. The FBI is already on their way. You're finished. Austin's confidence shattered in an instant. His face twisted with rage, but it was quickly replaced by panic. He stood up, grabbing his briefcase. You think this ends with me, he spat, his voice full of venom. You'll destroy the company just to take me down. But Richard stood his ground. No, Austin, you're done. This ends with you. Austin's face twisted in frustration. But there was nothing he could do. With a final look at Richard and then me, he stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the room, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. I stood there, still processing what had just happened. The man who had almost destroyed everything was now nothing. And the company, Richard's company, would survive thanks to me. The room fell into a deep silence after Austin left, the weight of his exit heavy in the air. Richard stood by the window for a long moment, staring out at the city below. The once unshakable empire that had been on the brink of collapse now felt solid again, grounded by the truth. He turned to me, his face softer than I had ever seen it, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "You saved everything," he said, his voice keener now, but with a reverence that caught me off guard. There was no pride in his tone, no boasting, just gratitude. He looked at me, the woman who had once been invisible in the world of polished suits and glass towers. And for the first time, I felt seen. Without you, I would have lost it all. This company, everything I've worked for, it's all still here because of you. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to being noticed like this. It wasn't about the money or the position. It wasn't about any of the rewards that had been offered to me. It was about the simple, overwhelming truth that I had done something that mattered. Something that made a difference in someone else's life. And it had changed my own life in ways I couldn't yet fully understand. Richard wasn't done yet. He reached for a folder on his desk and slid it toward me. "I want you to be more than just someone who cleans these floors," he said, his eyes meeting mine with unwavering seriousness. "You have an eye for detail. You see what others don't. I want you to lead a new task force. You'll review all of our contracts from the last 2 years. Find any discrepancies, any fraud. You'll be in charge." The words hung in the air between us. Surreal. I had never imagined that a janitor's life could lead to something like this, leading a team of professionals, making decisions that would impact the future of the company. The reality of it felt like a dream. But I knew it was real. My hands trembled as I reached for the papers in front of me, my mind spinning with possibilities. "You'll be paid well." "Of course," he added. But I hardly heard him. The money didn't matter. What mattered was that someone Richard Vaughn believed in me. He believed in me enough to offer me a future. One that had never seemed possible before. The life I had been surviving was now something I could leave behind. I stood there, still processing everything, when Richard spoke again. "I'm not offering this to you out of pity, Maya. I'm offering it because you've shown me something I didn't know existed in this world anymore. Integrity. You've reminded me what it means to do the right thing. Even when no one's watching." His voice was quiet, but it held a strength that resonated deep within me. When I left the office that day, I felt like a different person. The woman who had walked into that building, invisible and unnoticed, was no longer there. I had been given a chance to rewrite my story, to live a life that meant something. That made a difference. I drove home that evening, the sound of my old Corolla rattling more than usual. But I didn't care. I pulled into the parking lot and looked up at the apartment window where Ella waited. She had no idea what had happened today, but I couldn't wait to tell her. For once, my future didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a door opening to something new, something brighter. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was here, and I mattered. As I turned off the car, I received a text message from Richard. "The foundation's been created. It's for integrity. For the people who stood up when no one else would. And you're the first person I thought of to lead it. It's yours, Maya." I smiled and typed back, "Thank you. We did it." And in that moment, I realize this was just the beginning. If this story moved you, if you believe that one small act can truly change everything, leave a comment below. Let us know how it made you feel and where you're watching from. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it today. Because kindness and courage still matter in this world.